And a protest by African nations brought the Copenhagen Climate Conference to a standstill on Monday. They staged a walkout, saying that the Kyoto Protocol that imposes legally binding emissions cuts on developed countries is being sidelined. Talks resumed after their concerns were addressed. Earlier, I spoke to Dorji Sun. He's the CEO of Carbon Conservation, which works to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by trading carbon credits. Their work helps to preserve the rainforest in Aceh. I asked him why he wasn't at the conference.
In 2007, December, there was the Bali Roadmap, and it led everything towards Copenhagen. But given the global financial crisis, given all of the stagnation in negotiations, we made a hard call about a month ago, and we just decided we should stay planted on the ground, focus on real projects, real carbon, rather than just watch a bunch of talking heads.
Speaking of the talking heads, negotiations stalled yesterday when African nations, developing nations, walked out because they thought that they were being let down by the rich countries. Does that kind of division reflect on the ground in the kind of projects that you do, for example, in Aceh?
So there is a huge amount of global geopolitical negotiation happening right now. The Chinese are currently at odds with the Americans in terms of the transfer of how the CDM mechanism or the Clean Development Mechanism will work. Actually, our governor of Aceh is going with SBY, the president of Indonesia, over to Copenhagen. But on the ground, people at a grassroots level, they just fundamentally want to alleviate poverty, find alternative livelihoods, and they want to do the right thing. So if they know that slashing and burning, so in the case of Aceh, what we generated there was a huge number of carbon offsets by protecting a forest. If they know that chopping down a forest is wrong, they want to do the right thing, but when you've got mouths to feed, it's hard to find an alternative.
So what do you do? There seems to be this idea in some of the coverage at Copenhagen that you just throw money at developing countries in order to help or adapt or mitigate climate change.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether the handout mentality has ever really helped any country develop itself out of, for example, poverty or LDC status. I just came from Bhutan, and it's such a beautiful country. And although it's an LDC country, and one of the least developed countries in the world, it actually still is happily developing green. And by that, what I mean is they recently had democratic elections. In their constitution, 60% of their forest must be retained. And on top of that, they've got huge hydro. And so actually 1,500 megawatts of hydro means that 99% of their base load comes from renewable energy. So currently what's at odds in terms of the negotiations and on the ground is that there are a lot of countries trying to do the right thing, and they're not being rewarded by the climate process which is currently occurring.
All right, can you give me then one concrete example from all your travels around the region that what you would say is a kind of model for future sustainable development?
Wow. Well, okay, if you're to look at a situation where they've got huge challenges, you've got to look at Aceh. So Aceh, which is at the tip of the Sumatran island, if you look at the rest of Sumatra, literally 25% forest cover remaining, yet north of this border, because of the civil conflict, there's still 60% forest cover remaining. The impact of the tsunami and the development pressures is so huge that if you were to try to look at it conventionally, there's no hope for the forest to remain. There's very little hope for it not to extract all of its natural resources just to survive and develop. But if you look at a green, low-carbon model of development, they're looking now at geothermal, they're looking at agriculture on the degraded land and protection of the forest. So if carbon could step in to remunerate them for the forest protection, you could actually have an alternative development model. Now, on a good sort of characteristics, you know, Bhutan has the greatest chance, I think, of staying green and developing green.